So much. The shopping, the schlepping, the cleaning, the cooking, the cleaning up after the cooking, the table setting, the service planning, the seating planning, the serving and clearing, and again, the cleaning and putting everything away, and then the question, what are we going to eat all week? With Pesach just a day away, many of us are exhausted already. The vast majority of big decisions have been made. Where we will be for the Seder, with whom, what we're making or bringing, what we're wearing, how late the evening might run, what we'll give away for Afikoman prizes, how do I keep my system regular with all that matzah, sinkers or floaters, Ashkenazi or Sephardi, walnuts or pecans, oh my. It's just too much. The greatest blessing in the world, freedom, comes with a hefty price tag. Choices and decisions on top of choices and decisions. It's just too easy to become preoccupied with the minutia and lose track of the essence of our celebration of freedom. The truth is, many of us are spoiled by our freedom. And I lump myself into that crowd, burdened and challenged with my first world problems and responsibility, that it is even hard to imagine what the reality of not being free would look like and feel like in any sort of accurate way. We are so very far from living enslaved and personally knowing the plight of the slave that we perseverate on the details of our beautiful, comfortable, indulgent Seders, and only while sitting at the table with the Haggadah open in front of us do we for a moment consider, hear, think about, imagine, and maybe feel a sense of sadness about what it might have been for some, and still is, a real lack of freedom. We then close the book, enjoy the gefilte fish or not, followed up by soup and delicious meals, sing songs, eat chocolate-covered matzah candy, and leave the table to get all tucked in. We're filled with delicious food and the nourishment of our rituals and the beauty of our tradition. Our regular life actions resume the next morning as they were pretty much the day before and continue, that is, except for the fact that we stay away from bread and pasta and floury goodness for a week. But isn't it the purpose of the ritual to inspire us, to change us, not simply entertain us, to instruct and not just remind? This year's Passover holiday feels very different to me. I haven't cooked a thing, cleaned a thing, made a single list. Don't panic. I do have some Passover matzah and other matzah substances that I can do some cooking and cleaning and baking soon enough. But if you know me, you know it's not like me to avoid the planning. I love the planning. But if I'm being honest with you, I must tell you that I have felt distracted from what is the usual business of logistics and Seder details. I've been feeling troubled, even irritated about the larger issues of slavery, struggle, and freedom. This is because a couple weeks ago, Anna Shabtai and I traveled with a group of almost 50 members of our congregation to the American South for a civil rights journey. We met in Atlanta and traveled to Montgomery, Selma, and Birmingham to learn about the civil rights movement and the history of slavery in this country. It was an extraordinary trip. And the things that we saw, heard, and learned have been haunting me ever since. The images of suffering, the personal stories of oppression and organized discrimination, the horrific depictions of torture that a race of people suffered here in our country, in our state, in our county, are devastating. How human beings are capable of such hatred and evil is beyond my understanding. We toured the Equal Justice Initiative's Legacy Museum, National Memorial for Peace and Justice, and the Freedom Monument Sculpture Park. If you ever have a chance to visit any of these sites, you must go. The history-telling exhibits are masterfully created to draw in the visitor and starkly uncover the reality of the Black slave experience in this country. I was horrified to learn that over the course of the transatlantic slave trade, 12 million Black men, women, and children were kidnapped from their native countries and brought to America as slaves. 12 million people. I walked around repeatedly asking the question, how are 12 million people kidnapped? How is that even possible? And how did that victimization continue for hundreds of years? I learned that 2 million people died in the incomprehensible ship journeys to our country's shores. And new research suggests that nearly 6 million Black people died enslaved in the American colonies and the U.S. At the heart of the sculpture park, a 17-acre site, rises the National Monument to Freedom, which honors 4 million formerly enslaved Black people who won freedom after the Civil War. The Equal Rights Initiative explains that the huge wall encompassing more than 100,000 names representing millions of Black families that are engraved there, that it's forging a connection to the courage, strength, and resilience of ancestors that you can even just reach out and touch the wall. Standing before that huge, towering edifice, seeing the family names in relatively small print covering every inch of the monument on both sides, knowing it is just a tiny little number and representation of those who suffered, just more than 100,000 names, and trying to imagine what those families endured was completely overwhelming. And I quietly wondered, inside my soul, how did my ancestors, my family, how have I benefited from the history of slavery and oppression in this country? The other experience that I want to share with you was what felt like to walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. Our outstanding tour guide, Billy Planer, told us the history of the Selma to Montgomery March, which consisted of 3 different marches in the spring of 1965 and marked the political and emotional peak of the American Civil Rights Movement. We learned about Bloody Sunday and Turnaround Tuesday and the 5-day march from Selma to Montgomery. As we walked across the bridge named for a former U.S. Senator and Supreme Leader of the KKK, I felt tears well up in my eyes and an emotional tightness in my chest. Walking that same bridge, just more than 60 years later, now more educated about the history of slavery in this country, side by side with my Jewish community, felt like an act of defiance, of protest, of continued resistance. And on the other side of the bridge, when I saw a rock with these words, I was taken aback. The inscription on the rock said, "When your children shall ask you in time to come, saying, 'What is the meaning of these stones?' then you shall tell them how you made it over." This verse, which comes from the book of Joshua, references the monument that the ancient Israelites built once the entire community had finished crossing the Jordan River to the Promised Land. A representative from each tribe was commanded to pick up a stone from the river and carry it to the place where the ancient Israelites encamped for the night. The book of Joshua tells us that God dried up the waters of the Jordan before the Israelites crossed, just as God did the Sea of Reeds in the book of Exodus. When I saw the words on the rock, I immediately thought of Deuteronomy 6, verse 20, which says, "When in time to come your children ask you, what is the meaning of the decrees, laws, and rules that God commanded you, you shall say to your children, Avadim Hayinu. We were slaves in the land. We know God freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand." Yes, the central text, the central mitzvah of Passover, the Magid, the storytelling of the Passover story, and the text from Joshua at the rock at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge are all about telling our children. We must tell the story. Our sacred text demands that we tell stories. Our story of going from slavery to freedom, and in my interpretation, the story of slavery, oppression, and suffering of all people. And we must not conflate the two. Yes, our ancestors knew slavery, and our humanity calls on us to bear witness to the unique story of suffering and enslavement of others. There is no competition when it comes to slavery. There is no competition when it comes to hate. There is no competition when it comes to pain. To compare or equate minimizes the human experience and diminishes it. Yes, the matzah and the shank bone and the charoset and the salt water are all important. And those important symbols ready us, charge us, and one might say command us to open our eyes, our ears, our hearts, our souls to the suffering of others and the enduring shackles of servitude that are not ancient history, but are actually very near to us. And so you now understand why shopping, schlepping, cleaning, and cooking have not been top of my mind lately. I'm grappling, struggling, figuring, and considering in ways uncomfortable and hard and complicated, ways mandated by our heritage and our faith, ways that strive to bring about the blessings of freedom for those who are not yet free. And I hope that you will join me. Shabbat Shalom.